Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name is Luke Payson. Welcome back to everyone who are already subscribers to the YouTube channel. We recently went over 100,000 views, but not subscribers. We can still do with a lot more subscribers. So if you're not already subscribed, please join by subscribing so you can see more great interviews, including the one coming at you right now, coming off an absolutely spectacular fight at Brawl in the Burgh 20 for 247 Fighting Championships, which is February 24th, 2 days ago. He is now on a 3-fight win streak. Craig Perry! Craig, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's always fun to be on here.
It's always fun talking to you on the show and in person, and some of the conversation we were having before we started taping was also really fun. So let's talk about the fact that, and I said this is going to be fun. You had this great win. We will get there. But I was trying to find you after the fight. There was a party. There was an after event party, which is really cool. I got there a little bit later because I was interviewing some other people, of course, and you were gone. Couldn't find you. Messaged you, and you got back to me saying that you had jumped on a plane just hours after your fight, flown to Florida, like the absolute rock star you are. I feel like that's a Conor McGregor type thing, who is your like idol when it comes to how you fight. So talk about that first. What led you to book a plane on the same night that you were going to be fighting absolutely your toughest opponent to date? I mean, Chance Grillot is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, had, I don't know, 6, 7 MMA fights. You guys both very experienced. It was gonna be your second advanced amateur fight ever, but obviously a big deal. And so anyhow, so what led to you booking the flight, and what confidence did that show in you, and how did all that play out? And then we'll back up and get to the fight itself.
I mean, so I wasn't looking ahead of the fight at all. I wasn't like, easy win, I'm gonna go on vacation right after because I know I won't get hurt. It was nothing like that. It happened because like 4 or 5 weeks out from the fight, I had so much weight left to cut. And I haven't like gone and done anything fun since last year. So like this whole year has just been like, go to the gym, like go to work in the morning at like 4:30 a.m. After work, go straight to the gym. After the gym, go to the Planet Fitness and run like 4 miles, try to get the weight down, no fun food. So like halfway through January, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to book, because after these fights, I'm always like, I'm going to enjoy life for a little bit. And I end up just like doing nothing. Like I'll just stay home for a little bit and I won't make good use of the time. And then I'll just hop right back into like a fight camp or something. So I was like, I'm going to book myself a trip to Florida for just a few days, just so that I can't make an excuse of like not to go. And that way it's just like something fun to do after the fight, win or loss. I just wanted to like get out of town and get my mind off of everything for a few days. So that's why we made that decision.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you explaining. Obviously, I know your character and the coaches you train with and your attitude. You're not the type of guy to overlook anybody or be disrespectful. So we know it wasn't about that. That very well may become like a pattern for you. Who knows? You're still young in the game. You're developing what works for you. Every fighter has what works for them, both in the weight cut, both, at one point, Misha Cupcake Tate was nicknamed Cupcake. Misha Tate was nicknamed Cupcake because that's what she would crave during her weight cut so much that they would have cupcakes waiting for her in her room after she weighed in. And she transferred her name from Takedown Tate, which was her original name because she was such a heavily grappling base, to Cupcake because of how much she, like, that's what she would look forward to. She'd weigh in and run right back upstairs. I couldn't really imagine breaking like the weight cut with a cupcake. I can't imagine that was like the best thing to do, but that's what she would do. So that's why
that's funny.
Her nickname. So you're looking at Craig Vacation Perry going, no, I'm just kidding. But anyhow, so you going on vacation right afterwards makes sense. It's also the mental part of the game. Like, I know Lucas Siebert, and Lucas Siebert studied sports psychology at WU, and he talks about the mental game a lot. I know you guys know each other, and obviously, and so if that's part of it, that it became so much misery and work for you to just go training, work, and all that, to be able to put something positive. And I'd say for all the fighters out there, the fact that you were going to reward yourself regardless of whether or not it was a win or a loss, I think is psychologically important, because when you only reward yourself when you win, you actually put too much stress, right? There's got to be
Yeah.
some acceptance that you can't control everything, that you've got to do your best. And of course, you are coached by one of the best fighters in the area, Kama the Death Star Worthy, and he had some incredible wins in the UFC, one of the greatest underdog wins of all times. And also sometimes things didn't work out in some of those fights too. And I know he's the type of coach that you got to control what you can control, but you got to be able to accept sometimes when things don't always go your way. So now that we're through that part, let's talk about the fight itself. The story is obvious. It's kind of nice now that I think you've officially beaten the fact that you started out with an 0-3 record, because now you're 3-3. So you went 0-3 and 3 and now 3-0. So hopefully that, I mean, I'll still probably bring it up because it's a great human interest story when you're running out. He started his fight, off at 0-3. And there's even I can't remember offhand, but there's even UFC champs. It wasn't Spider Silva, but it was one of the main UFC champs. Started his pro career 0-1 and then won a bunch. So it's like, even at the pro level that can happen. At amateur level, the record doesn't matter at all. And it's always about developing your skill. So that really doesn't matter. But even at the pro level, there are times where sometimes people start rocky and then end up going on a complete run. But you came into this match against Chance, who had fought in 247 and only ever lost to top guys. And of course, now I'd put you in there as well. He's a great fighter, and he only really ever loses to top guys. So what was your thought? We had already had you on before. What was your thought going into round one? Did you have a game plan that you wanted to kind of try to use against him specifically, and how did round one go for you?
Yeah, we knew Chance was like a very, very, very good grappler. And like you said, like, I'm obviously great friends with Miguel, who beat him. And I like to say I'm good friends with Bobby. Bobby, he's always traveling now and he's super focused, but when he's around, we get along well. But obviously, like, those were two of his losses that we knew of, and those guys are just so good that it's like, it almost wasn't even worth it to compare or like really look at those losses, because those guys are just like, in my mind at least, those two are like here. So I wasn't thinking like this is my path to victory or anything like that. I knew it was going to be a tough fight. So round one, we knew like his kickboxing was pretty good, but we were like, he's obviously going to look to maybe take you down. So Kama and Chris Williams were like, keep everything up the middle, look for that liver kick, shoot your jab from the hip if you can, which I should have done a better job with. But yeah, I mean, obviously he still got a takedown in the first round. But yeah, we were just trying to keep it on the feet, keep the distance, and that rear naked choke that he put on in that first round, I was telling you after the fight, that was extremely tight. I don't know. I mean, obviously like, you're in fight or flight mode, so that probably helped. But in the gym, like in a gym setting, 10 out of 10 times I would tap to that. But I mean, in the cage with everyone watching, you're like, I'm just going to go to sleep or keep fighting. So luckily it worked out because he's super strong and obviously he's super slick. So that was a pretty tough situation to get out of.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. Obviously, that's kind of a decision you have to make on the fly when you're in the cage. You're not really going to tell yourself ahead of time what you're going to do in certain situations. But he had you in a bad way in the first round. You ended up getting out of it. He had put it on a couple different sides. I think the point you and I kind of remember is when it appeared that while you never lost consciousness, it appeared that you were kind of about ready to go out, and then he either adjusted or maybe you had just enough wiggle room, or who knows, because it's a blood choke. For people that never been in a blood choke, it turns your brain off. So it's not like you can do something. So something happened, the blood was reflowed to your brain, or maybe because this also happens, maybe you were able to calm your breathing. That's a huge deal because you're in flight or fight, you're in a fight. And I saw you doing that. I believe did he have double hooks, or was he going with the triangle body lock? I think it was double hooks.
He had double hooks, and then I felt him put on that like that body triangle, and then I tried to do that thing where like if someone crisscrosses their feet, and I don't know if he felt it at all,
Yeah,
but
that's
I
right.
tried
Because
to like
you rolled the correct way. You rolled towards his ankles to put pressure. Because if
yeah
you roll towards the knee side, you've just made it tighter. You
yeah
put his, and that's like an easy thing to remember. You'll if you're ever in a body lock, you always want to put your opponent's foot flat on the ground,
yes
which is what you did, and it's to put pressure on the ankles like this. And who knows? You'd have to ask him if it worked or not, but you got out, so that's the big.
yeah it worked out.
So mentally coming out of that, because these are longer rounds. These are longer
Mhm.
rounds. You looked good on your feet, but coming out of the first round, obviously he had the dominant position. A couple near submissions from the rear naked choke, back take stuff. So coming out of the first round, how did you mentally sort of reset? Because I think you, comma Chris Williams, everybody, you do a great job at mentally resetting. Because that round, while you got through it, kind of you didn't want to do two more rounds like that where he's in a dominant position threatening with submissions, which is pretty much Grillo's thing. I mean, that's why he's
Yeah.
good. So what was it like coming out of the first round? What was the advice like, and how did you turn the tables going into the second?
Well, that's something that I feel like I always say this, like the past two fights and now this one. But it's just true. Like I messed up so many things in that fight. Like everyone was like, "Oh, you got the submission over a good grappler. Like it's so good." But I think if I'm being honest with myself, like he was tired, and I had hurt him a little bit on the feet. That's why I think I got the submission, and I think I want to say like lucky, but I got an opportunity that maybe I shouldn't have because I messed up so many things. Like Kama and Chris were like they were drilling it in my head in between rounds. They were like, first of all, as soon as he shoots, I should have been fighting for my underhooks,
Yeah,
which sometimes I got lazy with. I should have been keeping things up the middle. Like Chris loves, they call it like an eight, like where you shoot your cross like this instead of
right,
like this.
right.
And I should have been keeping it like that. Should have been shooting my jab from the hip more. There's a lot of things that they were asking for that, like, in the fight, it's just so hectic that, like, it's not that I didn't want to do it. It's just like things happen. But, no, Kama and Chris, they had a great game plan for me. And, like, maybe I followed it like 10% as good as I should have, but it still worked out well. But, the advice they were giving me was really good. I, that's something I think I need to work on more is like, I need to just like trust what they're saying and just like no matter what this like don't react so much to the situation and maybe put my game plan forward more because I was telling Kama this too, like whenever we spar at the academy, we end up sparring like Kama, Shaka, and then like Miguel comes and Miguel's so good. And like you end up sparring with such good people that like in the fight sometimes I almost just assume certain things won't work because I'm so used to them not working with those guys. But I think in the next fight, I'm just gonna like really just like make sure that my game plan is the first thing that I'm doing.
Sure. That I mean, I think that is part of the mental game. Also, you're still young and you're an amateur. There are pros 10 fights in that are still trying to better exact their game plan, right? Because there is a balance. You can't be in a fight and only do what you want to do because you've got to be able to figure out what your opponent's doing, right?
Yeah.
But it makes sense that putting your opponent into your world or what you want to do is also important. So makes perfect sense. I think there's always that delicate balance you have to find, and you're finding it because at the end of the day, I mean, Kama has been in a lot of fights, but he's not fighting that fight for you. You have to
Mhm.
be able to be in there and do it. And when I was in people's corner and coaching them, I would always say, listen, I'm going to give you the advice that I think is going to give you the best chance of winning, but I'm okay with whatever you do in there because you're the one doing it. So whether you forget something or go something else or try to look cool and wave at your mom, whatever, it's you're the one that's in there. So there's that balance too, which is really,
Yeah.
really exciting. So talk us through. You ended up, it was announced as a leg triangle or a triangle win, which is what it is, but it was more of the arm bar within
Mhm.
the triangle for people that don't know, a triangle can both be a pure choke, but a triangle can also be a great way to hold somebody where you want them.
Yeah.
And it ended up being more of you holding them where it wanted. And if you rewatch one of the greatest sort of last second throw up a triangle and pray when
You're
Anderson
gonna
is
say
Silva,
Chael Sonnen versus
Chael
Silva,
Sonnen
right?
and Anderson is Spider Silva. If you
Yeah.
look at that, of course it is a triangle, but if you look, it was actually the armbar. You basically did what Silva did, because if you look, Silva, poor Sonnen. I did feel bad for Sonnen in that sense because he had won 23 minutes of the
Yeah.
fight. The poor guy, but and only he knows exactly what he tapped to. And then, of course, afterwards, he claimed he didn't tap and got into
Yeah.
heel mode and all that. But it certainly looked like he was doing what he could to fight the choke because he knew he only had like, what, a minute and a half left. But then when Silva went to the armbar, at least it appears that Silva went to the armbar and then did what I always called ski jumping, where you bridge your hips up. You know, you really, which you did, you really attack with your hips up.
Yep.
And that's when he tapped. So you ended up catching Grillo in the triangle armbar, but talk about the scramble that led to that, because he had initiated again a takedown, a ground sequence. So what was going on, and what led to that opening?
Okay, I gotta shout out a few different people for this one.
Sure.
So first, I'm gonna shout out Shaka because Shaka, Kama's brother, Shaka Worthy, he puts in so much work with Eddie and I and everyone else at the gym. Like he grappled with me for this one, like because I had an injury that we didn't talk about, and it's okay, we don't have to, but he worked with me like where we could, like because Shaka is such a professional. So he was the only one that grappled with me for this one. And he worked like positions with me and drills. And so whenever we were on the ground, in that sense, nothing felt unfamiliar because Shock is just such a professional with that stuff and he puts in so much work. So I have to thank Shocker for that, first of all. Second person I got to shout out is Miguel, because Miguel helped me a ton with just like mindset, weight cut stuff. And I always see Miguel. He got it in the sprawl in the bird thing. He goes triangle to armbar.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm shouting Miguel out for that one. I got to shout out Eddie because, like I said before, in the before podcast, Eddie's just always there for me for everything. So Eddie's just a huge help. And then the last one is funny enough. I probably shouldn't have thought this in the fight, but as soon as Chance he got to my back on the feet, you know, and I thought of Lucas in that one fight where he did that roll. You know, the kid was on his back and he
Yeah,
rolled.
yeah, you did the roll through. Yeah.
Yep. I was just like, screw it. I'm gonna do what Lucas did that fight. So I just rolled and I honestly I just ended up in that triangle position. So as soon as we were there, Chance was fighting it a little bit, and Kama was always like, Kama's style of grappling is this is such a Kama thing to say. He's like, I set up my submissions with strikes, which is like,
Yeah.
so I just thought, let me just hit Chance in the face a few times to just like jam my way into this triangle.
Sure.
And then I just switched it to the armbar. So that's how we got there. So I just wanted to shout out those guys because all those people, all that led up to that. So,
Yeah, and
yeah.
and I think visually it makes sense that he's on your back, he's wrapped around your waist, and visually being able to picture Lucas Siebert, because he'd done that in one of his, actually I think in a couple, but definitely there was one where he hit it very
He did it
well.
at the Meadows against that guy
Yeah,
from New York or something. Yeah.
yeah, something like that. So it makes sense because once you've seen something done, it makes it easier. And that's probably also the reason we'd have to ask the champ, the former amateur champ. Now that he's a pro, he's no longer the champ because that was a amateur belt. But he always does that type of roll into the cage, like that's what he's always done, even as
Yes.
a debut when I called his debut. So being aware of that and being able to pull that off, it looked really good. Also, quoting Donald Cowboy Cerrone, who I feel like he and Kama are very similar stylistic guys. And that is because they both love to strike. He was once asked, because he had a lot of submissions on the ground, and Donald Cowboy Cerrone was once asked, what's your favorite type of takedown? And he said a knockdown. And it makes sense, right? Because one of the things that's beautiful about jiu-jitsu, you mentioned Cowboy Eddie. I know that like before he did MMA, he was like thrown quickly into some jiu-jitsu tournaments to get him some
Yeah.
experience. You did, and they can be great. But one of the things that you'll see for somebody that's done a ton of jiu-jitsu, it's not a bad thing, it's just the sport of jiu-jitsu, is when they get on the ground, even if strikes are allowed, even if it's pro and elbows are allowed, they kind of go back to the rule set of jiu-jitsu, right? And I've seen this happen a lot where you'll even see it at the UFC level where two guys get up on the ground and let's say one's a jiu-jitsu guy, one's a wrestler. Now, obviously, they can use the strikes, but oftentimes it takes somebody who really loves ground and pound, who really incorporates it, like Randy Couture all the way back. He was a wrestler, but he always used his wrestling to bring up the strikes. We saw Lucas Seabrook get a finish with that. Instead of trying to get a dominant position and go for a submission, he used the top to get ground and pound. So you obviously were able to successfully punch from the bottom. That's also something people forget about at the pro level. Elbows from the bottom often get through because people aren't used to it. So a lot of things there. So once you punch him in the face and you put on the armbar, were you very confident that because what people might not know is you get a little wiggle room. Craig Perry showed the wiggle room you get in chokes. You don't get any wiggle room in joint locks. There's no wiggle room in your elbow. Just try straightening out your elbow to full extent and then push on it. There's no wiggle room in an elbow. So when you slapped that on, you punched him a couple of times, slapped it on. Did you know it was coming, or was it because it was that tap was pretty quick once you went to the armbar?
I mean, you're definitely right. There's no wiggle room in your elbow. It will go the wrong way. I can tell you that firsthand.
Yes, yeah, but that was different. That wasn't
Yeah,
a
that was
submission, but yes.
No, but and then
No wiggle room.
no, I mean, obviously, like with everything going on in the fight, like I mean, I knew that Chance, like it would be a tough decision to win. So when I saw that arm for the arm bar, I knew I had to go for it. But I saw his hand like coming up to tap, so I just let it go right away. I would never like.
Gotcha.
I mean, I would never crank something like that unless the opponent wasn't tapping.
Sure.
But it was like so in the moment. I just went with what was there.
Yeah, makes sense. And what's
Yeah.
nice, let's say his hand was coming up to tap and then you released and he didn't, you still have the triangle locked on. He wasn't getting out of it. So that's what's kind of nice. And we've even seen this at the high level. Somebody puts a submission on, it doesn't quite work, let's say, because they might have been trying to be nice, or maybe the opponent was coming up to tap. Sometimes there's hidden taps where an opponent will, reach under and tap a leg or something because the situation. There's been spots like that. So, and obviously Chance is a great guy and he wouldn't do like a fake tap to get out of anything. But what's cool is even if you do release it a little bit with the triangle still locked in, if he hadn't tapped, you still would have been a great spot. Once it was all said and done, before you quick jumped on a plane to go to Florida, what was the feeling like? What was the feeling like once you've defeated, and I hope every opponent you go against is your toughest opponent. I mean, that's what the legendary Jim Mooney gets paid to do, right? Put on great matches because that's what he's got to find. He's got to find matches which are always pushing it up. But by far, he was your toughest opponent. No offense to any of your other opponents. It's just he has such a skill set that you had to deal with. So what did the emotion feel like for you?
No, I mean, I think you could kind of read my lips, like if you were watching the live, but after the fight, like I just remember after the first, I was telling this to someone in the back too, like the worst feeling in those MMA fights. And after my first fight, I figured this out, is like you think that like you're wearing little gloves and you can just punch someone and knock them out, and you can, but if you hit someone and you don't knock them out, someone's head is so heavy and it hurts your hand so bad that like that's something that like you have to realize. So like whenever I hit him and he just stood there unwaved, like I mean he wobbled a few times, but like still he's so tough that like whenever I after like the first few seconds and after the first few times I hit him, I was like, this is gonna be a tough fight for me. And he's never gonna stop coming. He's never gonna stop like doing his thing. So whenever I won, I just remember like I told Kama, I was like, that took like everything I had in me. And the whole camp was just, it was just such a tough camp. There was so much adversity that like, I'm not like a brash guy or anything. I didn't want it to come off like cocky or like braggy that I jumped up on the cage. I just couldn't control myself. I was so happy. because that whole fight and the weeks leading up to it, it was just brutal, and it just took a lot out of me. So yeah, it just felt really good to win, and I don't know, it just like, it felt like I was like letting everything go, so
Sure.
it felt good.
Yeah, there's that emotional release. I mean, you have to put so much in. You have to put so much in to get yourself ready. And I believe, because I watched Cowboy Eddie after the whole fight was over, the doctors were lining up fighters for stitches. I mean, it was an incredible card. If people did not see it, there's still an opportunity to buy the pay-per-view replay. I would suggest just go ahead, download the 247 Live app. The 247 Fighting Championships has their own app, which is just incredible that they do. Get the year subscription because you get every pay-per-view, which will pay for itself because pay-per-views, in 2 pay-per-views, you're going to make back what you would in a whole year. So that's pretty fantastic. And then also when you get the year, you also get the entire bank of every fight ever. So if somebody's watching this, they can watch every fight you've had as long as they skip the first 3. And there you go. That was a little joke there. But what I was bringing up, Cowboy Eddie, Cowboy Eddie had some lacerations on his hands that they were stitching up. And I believe I was told by somebody that it was from exactly what you said, punching somebody. You know, he punched Hoot. That was an incredible fight back and forth. But with those gloves, bare knuckle gets all the credit because, you know, their hands are bare, but those gloves don't do a lot to protect. So I think Cowboy ended up splitting in his knuckle somewhere just from punching, you know, because particularly the forehead. In fact, a lot of times in street fights, they say don't even punch the forehead because you're gonna really hurt yourself.
You break your hand. And I do want to say real quick, I mean,
Yeah, sure.
this is just coincidence. I just realized I'm wearing like my Cowboy Eddie shirt. But I thought, and
Cowboy Eddie, he's got the best chance. Cowboy Eddie. Anyhow, keep going. Sorry. The crowd
no,
was
no,
doing that
you're
all
good.
night.
No, I 100% agree with you. He does have the best. He has a sick group of fans, but Eddie, Eddie would never say this because he's too much of a competitor, but I'm gonna say it for him. Eddie put in so much work for this fight, and I thought, and it's so hard to be a ref, but I thought when Eddie had Hoot hurt, and I don't know Hoot personally, so I have no problem with him. This is just my unbiased opinion. He had him hurt, and when that mouthpiece fell out in the rules meeting, for anyone that's watching that it's not part of the rules meeting, they tell you if your mouthpiece falls out, don't look at the ref and don't expect the fight to stop because it's rare that they stop the fight for the mouthpiece coming out. So Eddie had him hurt, and they still didn't stop that fight. And then he gets hit with a head kick that's illegal, and it ruins the whole momentum. I just thought that was tough to watch as his teammate.
Yeah.
And I would like to, I don't know. I want to see Eddie get that one back because he's everyone loves to hate him because he went 3-0 and he's such a big personality that people love to see people like that fail. But he's such a caring teammate, and he works extremely hard. And just as his teammates seeing everything that happens behind the scenes, I want to see him get that one back just because, I mean, you don't deserve anything when you get in there because anything can happen, but I thought he deserved more than that, if that makes sense.
Well, it certainly makes sense coming from his teammate. And also, yes, I've been in plenty of room meetings. I wasn't in that one, but we've seen it. I would say in general, anytime striking's going on, which they were on their feet, there was space, they were striking, it's a bad time to try to stop because anything can happen. We saw Lucas Siebert do a flying knee or a jumping knee in space. That might have looked like a time where, I could stop it, but the timing's there. The only time I would say where it makes complete sense is if they're really tied up on the ground, where they freeze the position. We've seen this where people are on, there's a position that's guard or even side control where you could freeze the action. The people are right where they're going to be. They're not moving anywhere, and you can put the mouth guard back in and then say time back in. We've seen that happen. That every once in a while up against the cage, that'll happen at the UFC level where somebody's kind of pinned, nothing's happening. Now, if they're raining elbows, they won't do it. But if they're kind of just underhooked and stagnant, they'll say, stay right there, put the mouth guard back in. But that's all the discretion of the referee. And
we were talking, it's a tough job.
It is a tough job. And one of the kind of worst examples of this was when Mike
Silva versus Bisping, right?
Man, we are just, this is like the third time we've done this. Mike Bisping, we're just on it. Mike Bisping versus Anderson Silva. Mike, as like a 35 fight pro, did everything wrong. Watch that.
Yeah.
He did everything wrong. The mouthpiece was out. It was like 12 seconds to go, and he literally turns away and starts pointing. And actually, in that case, the referee did everything right. He had picked it up, put it in his waistband, or was holding it, and was just not interfering because it was so close to the end, and because they were striking. And Spider, that was a completely legitimate. That was not a cheap shot. That was completely legitimate shot.
Yeah.
The jumping knee, and then Spider, of course, thought he had won due to the fact of just Bisping just fell over. In fact, some would say that the ref could have stopped it as a knockout because. But anyhow, so yeah, that's a weird thing. I certainly can see the point of view. Also, on Hoot's side, that wasn't Hoot's decision to stop the fight there because
no, it wasn't. No,
like you said, it wasn't shade on Hoot.
No, I'm not trying to start.
And,
I said,
of course not. And everything you said about Cowboy, I think. And there was another fighter later on the card, the main event, Mateo. I said the same thing to both of them. Basically, their skill, their talent, their drive, they will continue to win. Sometimes, fights don't go your way, right? They can be a learning experience. You're learning from a fight where you looked really good and got a great finish, and you're saying, I wish I could do this or this. Cowboy will learn from both his wins and his losses. I think the athleticism, his hard work, the crowd support, his skill training with you, what Pittsburgh Academy has become is incredible. Obviously, the Worthies, you mentioned Shaka, Kama, it's just incredible. But you, Cowboy, and everybody else that's coming up through the gym, you guys are just looking so good. That's one of those fights with, even with a loss, he still is progressing. And that can be hard emotionally to feel, but Cowboy, you're still progressing. You looked great. Who looked great? It was the matchup to make. It was an incredible back and forth war. He's going to be back better, and that's why the legendary Jim Mooney is probably working to figure out what he can do for Cowboy to get things, to get Cowboy back in there in the future, because it's going to be incredible. I know you're kind of implying a rematch. I won't call for that. That's whoever wants to call for the rematch. Maybe you can, but whoever wants to call for a rematch, I don't know what's going on with that. I'm not Jim Mooney, although I do think he's a wonderful guy. So, but anyhow, I really appreciate you coming on. The whole event, 13 fights, was just absolutely spectacular all the way through. Incredible venue. I know you're taking time off. Are you open to fighting April 20th at the Meadows, or with everything going on, are you going to wait until the announced June card?
I don't know. It's so hard to remember. I know I have something in April. I just don't know if it's that weekend or not. Because I'll be going out of town. But I mean, we'll see. Like, I'll let you know once I know.
Sure.
But I just wanted to say real quick, just like one more time, just like thank you, just everybody, the Academy. Like, we're not the flashiest gym at all. It's very like, the Academy is, I think, I'll never leave there just because it's not flashy, and it's like, you're definitely not signing up. You can't pay to win there, and it's so obvious. And I love that about it, that it's like, if you want to put in the work, it's like super, like Kama will tell you how it is. And if you want to get beat up in a gym in the West End that's small and it doesn't look special, then that's how it's going to be. And that's why I like the Academy, and I love everyone there, Kirk and all the coaches. So I just wanted to throw that in there real quick. And as far as April, I would like to, but I don't know for sure. But I'm definitely going to get right back to work once I get back home, and I'm going to stay in shape too.
Well, that sounds great. That makes perfect sense. I'm glad you took time to really shout out your gym and the coaches. And every gym has its own milieu, which is the French way of saying like your own attitude, your own sort of culture. So yeah, every gym's got its own milieu. It works for you. I think that sounds like a really sort of tough, no nonsense type gym where you're there to really be a true fight gym. Pittsburgh is just filled. What 247 has really shown in the last 5 years is that Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, because we also count Gorilla House, there's just so much talent, so many great gyms.
It really is.
Yeah.
Like the Mat Factory and Stout as well. Sorry, real quick. I wasn't trying to say
No, 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 no.
Academy.
I mean all of them.
I go to
Oh, yeah.
both. I go to all three. I go to all three.
Oh yeah, no, all those three are huge. Gorilla House a little bit farther away. Plus, you got PA Combat Sports that just won New Gym of the Year. You know, like there's so many stuff going on. I appreciate you coming on. Enjoy the rest of your time there in sunny Florida. You've been listening to Luke Basin with MMA Fancast and Craig Perry. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.